Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate stories that heal. Today, we have a guest coming to us from New York, and it is our episode number 13. I want to thank all you guests that have been on our show, and I want to thank all you listeners who have subscribed, commented, wrote really, really nice things. And we've become friends with some of our listeners. So it's really been a wonderful way of meeting people for me as a podcast person. And I want to also thank all the guests that have been there because we've been trying to create a subscription list, and our subscription list is over 700 people now. So we're really happy about that since we just started in September. Today, I thought we would have a guest that would really connect with our last show with Lloyd Auerbach because she's a television producer. And I want to tell you a little bit about Laura Marini. Laura has been intrigued by the unknown since she can remember, favoring books on ghosts, witches, and the unexplained from a very early age. A producer for over a quarter of a century, she is happiest when she can combine her background in storytelling with the unknown, the mysteries, and the paranormal. In the past decade, she's produced over 100 stories for Travel Channel's Mysteries franchises, including Mysteries at the Museum, Mysteries at the Monument, Mysteries of the Great Castle, and Haunted USA. Several seasons of A Haunting for Lifetime Movie Network. 3 seasons of Destination Fear. She was supervisor producer for several seasons of Most Terrifying Places and consulting producer on Fright Club. And now she serves as the showrunner and the co-executive producer for the 11th season of A Haunting, which airs Friday nights at 10 p.m. on the Travel Channel and then drops a new episode the same day on Discovery Plus. I have watched the first 5 shows on the 11th season, and I can highly recommend that you watch them. So let's invite Laura here today. Hi, Laura. Welcome.
Hi, Gail. Thank you for the nice introduction. And I can't believe I'm lucky number 13.
I know. I thought that was pretty funny too.
Very cool.
So I want to say how happy I am. You're my first television producer that I'm interviewing.
Hopefully not your last.
Yeah.
The
No,
first
because we'll
many.
have Kay Rothman coming up in the future.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yes. And I want to say the first thing I'd like to find out about is, what is all the things that were going on in your life as you were growing up that brought you to decide that you wanted to be a television producer, but then specifically doing these shows of paranormal and shows that can be frightening, like Haunting or Poltergeist, or the things that people experience but are often afraid to talk about. You seem to be able to get them to talk about it, because one of the things I really valued in your show is that even though you're having a reenactment, you're then at the same time speaking with the actual people who had the experience, which validates everything that you're showing. So I personally appreciate that kind of a show very much. So can you tell us about that?
Wow, sure. Let's see. I mean, I think a lot of your listeners will probably have the same kind of experience where they've known since they were, I can't, that they can't even remember a time when they weren't interested in the unexplained, you know. I think it's just born into you. And I just remember I went to, back in 1969, I was, my hometown didn't have, public kindergarten, so we were sent to library school where we were carted off to the local library and kind of had kindergarten, but we had the run of the library before it opened, which I think just stoked my love of libraries and books. But I always picked books on witches and magic caves and coves and covens and all that kind of cool stuff. And then when I was like 12 years old, I remember I bought a book on Edgar Casey when I was 12 with my babysitting money. So, that's kind of a funny thing. And I grew up in a house that was like an old Victorian house, built in like 1864, I think it was. So it had a lot of creaks and groans. And my siblings and I used to kid about this, or not really kid, because we were actually really were afraid. we had this ghost in the attic we used to call Green Eyes. But it turned out much later when we were cleaning out the house that it was just an old wreath with some lights on it that was at the end of this. Like, our house was actually the old Unitarian church, what do you call it, for the pastor, the house that the pastor would have.
Mhm.
And it was part of the Underground Railroad up in the north.
Wow.
So there were false walls and stuff. So this was like this weird closet that kind of went around and took a turn and went all the way down the side of the house in the attic. So I'm assuming people probably hid up there. I don't know. But anyways, this old wreath was at the very end of it and everything else was in front of it. So whenever we would see it, we called it Green Eyes. Anyways, and I'm still afraid of ghosts, which my boyfriend thinks is absolutely hysterical because I that's how I pay my mortgage. But I also, strangely enough, have a master's degree in international relations, and I've had several secret clearances working for the military. So it's not like this is all I do, but this is my jam. I certainly, this is like, I feel like I've kind of hit my stride, especially with this last season of A Haunting. It was a really amazing year of putting those shows together.
I have questions about how you do that. And I don't know that I'll have these all in the right order, but
Okay.
I'm just going to let them pop up for me
Yeah.
with this. One of the first questions I had was like in the scene in Asylum 49, which I think was episode 5,
Hmm.
uh, it takes place in what they've recreated a haunted house
Right.
inside what was once a hospital, correct?
Hmm.
My question is, when I saw the scary doll with the blood all coming out on the front, sitting in the chair there,
Hmm.
was that actually some of their things from their haunted house, or have
No,
you?
I mean I don't want to give away too many secrets, but
Okay.
all right, I've produced many different kinds of shows. Like when I did Most Terrifying Places, I would go on the road with the cameraman, and we would pick up the rest of the crew and do the stories on location at those places. So you'd be shooting not only the B-roll of the place and the interview with the owners and the stories from the investigators, but you'd also be shooting the dramatic recreations on location.
On
You'd
location.
bring costumes and stuff and travel with a giant trunk all the time. This kind of a show, we actually so when you talk to Kay, you'll ask her because we would send her out most of the time to interview the folks in the sit down interview.
Is that what
It
the
was
field producer
That's
does?
a field producer job, and for most of my career, I was a field producer. So this is only recent that I'm now like home base in a sense and running the show, the entire look of the show. Um, so, anyways, so there's so much research that goes into it beforehand. You know, not every story can hold the whole hour. So, you know, we've vetted these stories, we've talked to the guests, we've prepared the questions, and then when the field producer comes back with their interviews and some B-roll of the local area to kind of give it a flavor, we shoot everything else in Virginia because that's where the production company is.
Mhm.
Um, so we have a location scout that we will send pictures of the actual location and they'll find a lookalike location. So what you were seeing was an actual Masonic lodge that had its own um, what do you call it? A haunted house already in it. So we rented that. So it wasn't shot at the interviews though that you see the sit down interviews of Dusty and Kim and Tyson and everything. That's actually in the real place in Tooele, where we sent a crew. That one actually wasn't Kay. I think that one was David Haycock's, I think. Although I could be mistaken. I think it's David. Anyway, we have some wonderful crews. And so they shot all the interviews there. They flew out to that area and they did the interviews there. But we cast and shot the rest of the all the dramatic recreations in Virginia.
So when you did the ones where on the other show, when you were doing going to the actual sites, is there any one in particular that stood out the most for you that you could share with our listeners that filming there was either really creepy or
Yeah,
amazing or whichever
yeah.
things you were feeling?
Yep. Let's see. There's lots of them, but one in particular, we were shooting international stories for Most Terrifying Places in 2019. So I went over, me and my cameraman, who I adored, David Cavallo. We flew over to England and we started shooting a whole bunch of stories. But this one was in Drakelow Tunnels. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, it's back in World War II. the British built a factory inside of a mountain so that the Nazis wouldn't see it as they flew overhead. So I think it was a lorry factory, and it had like 7 miles of tunnels that had been dug into this mountain. And it was also, the BBC had a radio room. There was a hospital in there. There was a cantina. Like, it was like an underground city in a sense, just because if any over, if a plane flew overhead, they couldn't see what was going on. So I gather one of the tunnels, they used too much dynamite to open, to blow it out, and a gentleman had been killed in that avalanche. And now, many years later, it was used as the factory during World War II, and then it became like a fallout shelter in the 50s or 60s, and then it became like where the local government would go in case anything was a problem. And then it just wasn't being used at all. It was abandoned, and a family bought it so they would keep some other company from putting toxic waste in it or something, and
Oh,
opened it up for historic tours. And they found that there were a lot of paranormal investigators who wanted to do overnight tours, and so they were allowing that, and charging them a fee or whatever. And they were all reporting so many people were seeing this guy in coveralls, in a hat, that wasn't part of their team. You know what I mean? And so one gal had told us the story that she was, with her group, and they were talking, and they were doing a head count, and there was like an extra person or something. And she looked over, and this guy was kind of leaning against a doorway of some kind, like a big, huge dirt doorway. And he turned and started walked into the tunnel, and she walked. I would not do this. I mean, come on. A white girl going in, so it's like a bad movie, right? Like, if the walls bleed, go home, I'm leaving. Anyway, so she turned, and she had, and a couple other people went with her, and they're following him, and it dead ends, and he's not there, and there was nowhere for him to have gone. So they're like, okay, must have been him. So after she tells the story, we're doing the dramatic recreations, and she's actually psychic herself. I think she's not like a full-blown psychic, but very sensitive. So we were doing the recreations, and I've got pictures. I should have sent them to you, and I can send them to you actually if you want to put them up on your site.
yeah, send
uh,
them.
we had a
Tomato.
production we had a lovely production assistant, local young guy from England. He was taking photos just for, behind the scenes. And there's a shot where I'm standing next to the cameraman, just giving directions, and there's this gal, Jolene, who told her story, and this guy playing her friend, an actor playing her friend Gary, and the guy playing the ghost, in coveralls behind them. And then I step out of the photo, and the next picture you see, and we didn't know this at the time, we only saw it that night at dinner. Um, there's Dave, the cameraman, Jolene, Gary, Wolf, the guy who's playing the ghost, and on the back wall is another guy in overalls and a newsboy hat who's see through,
Mhm.
like full body apparition in a photo. And the weird thing is, Jolene, while we were shooting this scene, says, he's here. She felt him. And just to see the pictures that night at dinner, we were all a little blown away. And Dave is such a cynic. He would not. He was like, nah. I'm like, no one else on the crew was dressed like that. And Wolf was in the picture standing behind Jolene. And this other guy had a newsboy hat as well as the full, the coveralls. So that's pretty, and that place was really creepy. Like, you just wanted to, like, like, don't stick around any place and not be alone, you know.
I know
So,
when I was traveling, I was pregnant. This was a long time ago, like 45 years ago. And I was pregnant with my first daughter. And we were traveling around to, my father kept saying, oh, once you have a child, you'll never be able to go anywhere again. You'll be home all the time. So
mm-hmm,
I was worrying I'd never go anywhere again. So my husband and I took a trip early in the pregnancy to Europe. And
mm-hmm,
every time we would go into any of these castles or these, I would run out terrified from the feel, especially in places where they had like dungeons and torture places.
mm-hmm,
To me, the energy is still sitting in these places. It just has to do with how sensitive you are, whether
mm-hmm.
you can feel them or not. Um, I, I've felt the feelings of terror and fear, which brings me to another question about these kinds of shows. in these shows that you're showing, these 5 episodes I just watched, these are all real stories, which are backed by I forget what's the word you put up when they actual
Oh,
evidence.
actual evidence,
Right.
yeah.
So you do an excellent reenactment, and the actors do a great job. But when the people that pop in next are the ones that really experienced it, and you're interviewing them, it brings all this credibility to the show.
They're validating each other.
Exactly. But
Mhm.
what I want to know is, and I don't know that this is with every show, but do, when you interview them, have many of them said, and we don't live there anymore? Or have some of them said, we've learned to live with this, and which I saw in one of the episodes, and now we still do everything we want. We've had a clearing, we know how to deal with this. Because through my things have started very young also. I was doing astral projection or astral travel when I was 7. So
Mhm.
I've been doing out of body stuff for my whole life,
Mhm.
and been involved with things that are like ghost like and this sort of thing. But it was only when I got to a certain maturity level and a powerfulness in myself, and I have to say, being initiated as a shaman 10 years ago really helped me with a lot of this. I was able to go into scenes like the one I speak about in the last episode, Lloyd Auerbach, where I can go into a haunting like you talked about in the show Deliverance in Chicago,
Mhm.
and I don't have the same fear and terror that I used to feel when I was younger and exploring and going in places and knowing stuff was going on. I would feel scared, but my inclination was always to talk to someone about it. It seems that many people, and I want to know if that's what you find common, they're really afraid after they have the incident. They don't tell their wife. They come away and they're holding it inside. And I was wondering what ability you had to bring this out in them, or if you how you find these people to be on these shows. And then the fact that that particular show, they had film footage with their phone, they had things for you to put on the show. So I just want to know how's that happen.
I mean, it's a big process, but I mean, this show's been going on for 11 seasons, and it was like this is the granddaddy. I mean, I was a fan of the show before I ever worked on it, and it was I think 2002 or like 2006. Early on, they made a special called "A Haunting in Connecticut." It was like a 2-hour movie version, like of this really awful haunting and almost demonic possession of a young man, and it went over so big that the network it spun itself into a series, and that's what became A Haunting. And then this series is kind of what opened the door to paranormal television. I mean, uh,
Oh,
there were no ghost adventures. There was no other stuff. There might have been some little psychic shows where a little lady comes to your house and tells you something, but this was a huge thing for paranormal television. The whole genre basically can trace itself back to these early days of a haunting. So it was, I don't know who came up with the concept, but it was brilliant to mix the interview bites. And for us, it's very important to have corroborating stories. And as you'll see through all of it, we try to make sure at least 2 people talk about an event at any time, if not 3.
mhm.
And then I decided when I came on to, because you don't want to, like, people are enjoying the story, they're in the story, they're invested, they're going along with the person, learning the stuff. You don't want to pull them out of the story with, like, here's some evidence. So I try to make sure that we wove it into the story. Like if it's in the surveillance thing that they're looking at, the actors are looking at, or if it's in their phone, or if it's in the viewfinder, so that you're getting the evidence, but you're not yanked out of the story. So that was kind of something that I wanted to do for.
My husband also thought that he's a film guy, and he thought that was done very well.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
And yes, and he hasn't had those kind of experience. All he's had is watching me have them.
I know my boyfriend thinks it's hysterical that I'm I'm afraid of ghosts.
Well, that's what I was wondering there. Did you have like, so I've had, there's one experience I want to talk about at a certain point here where I experienced that feeling like you were explaining in Asylum 49, where it felt like someone was trying to take over my body. And I'm wondering, did you have something like this? Like, what has made your fear that's still there today after you've done all these things, because there's, we don't want to scare people in the sense that this is real, what we're talking about,
Mhm.
but we need to somehow soften or make them understand that they shouldn't have to be afraid. But I could understand why they are.
You know what it is? I think it's that final, like, you can't go back into, like, I know there's more than meets the eye out there. I think, it would be rather self-centered to think we're it. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Right,
there's so
right.
much more going on. And I've been witness to some of those things, but not to the point where I couldn't, like, that I couldn't take it back in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, I've heard strange things, I've felt strange things, I've even seen strange things, but none that I couldn't say, did I, make that up or whatever. So I think I'm afraid of that final time when it's so in my face that I can't say, maybe that was me. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? That's the point where you can't go back.
mhm.
And I don't know, maybe I just need a good shove. Um, I don't know. But I've brought Rourke home with me. I mean,
I
I
was
did
going to ask you about that.
the haunting of with Kim Russo. She's a wonderful psychic, and we'd take these celebrities who had these, experiences from Celebrity Ghost Story back to the place where they were haunted, and go through the house with Kim telling them, what she read and why they were contacted by this spirit or whatever. And we did one with Meatloaf, God rest his soul, in Woodstock at the studio that he made Bat Out of Hell. And when it ended up being, there was a ghost of a young woman that was, I guess, following him around, or that he had seen. Anyway, I come back to home. Jerome's a night owl, and I'm an early up, early to bed. He's, late. He's
Same
like,
here.
we have company. He's
Yeah.
like, I think there's somebody living in the kitchen. Okay. So yeah, and we had other times where we've heard footsteps walk up to the bed, that, oh my God, the door to my bedroom kept opening and closing, and none of the windows were open to create a draft, so we try to always debunk what it could be,
Mhm.
or I think it is. But I'm sure I've brought work home with me, and I've had people like psychics and stuff come up to me at like these paracons, and just give me advice unsolicited, like, you should be carrying, smoky quartz, or whatever.
Oh.
So
Well, actually, I would agree to whoever says this, that after you do your investigative work, when you do enter any of those kind of places, that you do a saging or a smudging or something on yourself
mm,
to just clear the
mhm,
atmosphere before you go back to your house. That
right.
that's one of the things that's worried me before, is taking home entities or things that may come with you.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I felt that I had that experience here in my home with my own daughter, and she was young, maybe 6 or something. I'm not sure. I can't remember, 6 or 5 or 6, but she was a little girl. And all of a sudden, she got very, very sick, but nobody could figure out what was wrong with her.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to bring her to the emergency room a couple of times, and nobody could diagnose anything. And we brought her home, and she would sit on the couch completely vacant. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a child. All of a sudden, this child became like non-interactive. And
Mm-hmm.
this is my daughter Tasha, and she just sat on the couch. And I was getting, the days and days were going by, and they were turning into weeks, and she was getting thinner and weaker, and she started to look, gray.
Mm-hmm.
And I was freaking out, not knowing what I could do to help my daughter. And when you have children, you'll die for them if you have to. You want
Right.
to give them
Yes.
that's just the feeling. I mean, not all parents are that way, but I'm that type of Jewish mother type parent. So we're all sit, we don't leave her by her side. We sit there, and when she would not even interact with a television show she liked or a video game, I'm just saying she was just like a zombie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we're getting scared and more scared, and they're not finding anything to tell us to treat her or to do with her, anything medical.
Mm-hmm.
and we're sitting in the room together, and I get this feeling that if I don't do something, she's going to die.
Oh my God.
And I'm feeling that I've got to interfere immediately. I don't know what it is. And you know how they talk about those things where, like, a mother picks up a car all of a sudden, or has an immense, amazing
Hmm.
adrenaline rush?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me, except it was on an inner spiritual kind of level. And
Hmm.
it's like an emergence that came out of me, and I treated her in a way I would never treat a child. All of a sudden, I picked her up from the couch and I said, "This is enough." I said, "You are going to die if we don't get this stopped right now." And I
Hmm.
take her outside, and the wind comes up like you see in a movie, like, where it's a
Ooh.
howling, kind of wind. And, my name is Gail. And it's the wind is coming up and the wind is coming up. And it's the kind of wind that when you're shouting, it's almost hard to talk because it's that
Hmm.
windy.
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
holding her body like this little tiny thing. And I'm saying to her, whatever's in here has to get out of you. This is killing you. We need to get Tasha back, and something's in there. We need our Tasha back. Get out of here. And I was just screaming this at the top of my lungs.
Mm.
And then I carried her back in the house. I put her on the couch, and within 15 or 20 minutes, she returned. And she had not been with us like for a couple of weeks. She
Wow.
just said, "Oh, I'd like some food now. Oh, can we watch some TV? Oh, I want to play a game." And
Did she not remember have any memories of where she went?
I never even asked, now that you mention that, but I could ask her now, even though it was so many more than 20 years ago.
It might be something that she
Everyone in my family that came in and saw her, because everyone was getting so scared, so everyone would keep popping in. My niece Valerie was living here then.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "I don't know what you did to Tasha." That was everyone's comment. "We don't know what you did, but you did something. Something changed, something, she's back." And
Uh-huh.
we had to, put weight on her again and this sort of thing. But she was present again, and Tasha was here, and that she was not before.
Wow.
And my family makes fun of me, but they also see these things going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the scariest times for me. And it was almost like I got out of the way and something else came through me and handled the situation.
Thank God.
I'm very grateful to that. And other people might think, "Oh, she must have made it up. Oh, it's a coincidence." It was a very real
Oh,
experience.
one you will not forget anytime soon.
No, and there are entities and things that do enter,
Mm-hmm.
like you're showing, and your description with the black mass.
Uh-huh.
There are many of us out here who know what you're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
for us to be able to see a show where we see things that we've experienced, but we're seeing them in the invisible, and
Right.
on your show, we're seeing it played out.
Well, we try to take people's description and do what we can, but of course they're, CGI. I mean, they're not real, but we try to keep to the heart and soul of the story and try to do it justice. So, yeah.
Of course, you can't recreate the black mass, but we know
Right.
what you're talking about with the black mass. Anyway, so tell us more about your shows and how you feel about the five episodes that have been out already so far.
They're all my babies, so I can't really, pick a favorite. But the ones that are coming up, because we have 10 episodes this season, I think they're all great. And what we really tried this season was to make sure it's all different kinds of hauntings. So, you saw, as you said, the Black Mass, doppelgangers. Trying to think of some other ones that
Poltergeist.
poltergeist. Thank you. Inner demons. Yeah. It's just I'm just trying to think. We're just trying to also not, I don't want to say educate because it's not PBS, but we do want people to like learn, I guess, the vocabulary. And also want to make sure that the folks who entrust us with their stories are happy with it. And I've gotten some lovely, I mean, the family from the Chicago story wrote us this glowing note. Even the dad was like, "How do you know I danced when I cooked beans?" And we're like, "It was just that was the actor just riffing on something," but it all kind of worked. It was kind of a magical year.
So do they, like, have you created friendships or bonds with any of the people after you have shared this with them? And are they, by the time they're doing your show, are they all at a place where they don't feel fear, or did any?
Yeah,
bring up fear for them to have to redo this again.
Well, actually, it's interesting you asked that. I mean, it's funny the folks who are the actors playing these people have seemed to connect with the real people on Facebook, and it's become like this love fest. It's so cute. Like the gals from Daydreams and Nightmares. The woman who played the lead character was actually an MMA fighter, a mixed martial arts fighter. Because I was trying to find. That's the thing too about casting real people, is to find someone with the essence of that person. So the woman Dana, it had there was a a strength to her, a slight, maybe people would say masculinity, but more like there's like this sweet toughness to her, and it was really hard to find that in someone, and also this likability that she had. So when I saw Dana's audition, and Dana, I mean not Dana, Constance, when I saw Constance audition, she didn't even audition for that role. She was auditioning for the wife's role, and so I was like, that's not Milan, that's Dana. There's our Dana. So
How do you find, I can see how you find the actors, but how do you find the stories and what, if someone wanted to present their paranormal story? Like I've been approached by my stories before, but whoever had approached me for television, nothing I had was scary enough. It didn't seem to have enough, like, whatever they needed. It didn't fit the scary information that they were looking for. They wanted something more. And I'm wondering, what's your criteria for that? And how do you, do you have a resume they fill out for their
well, I mean,
thing?
the show's been around a long time, so they have like this giant spreadsheet of investigators and psychics and people that they work with that might have private cases that
Oh,
they would go back and ask the folks, would you be comfortable talking to the producers? There's no commitment, and we'll fill them out. And if it feels like a legit story and we want to do it and they want to do it, we require that at least four people are involved in the story because we want that corroboration. And
mhm.
it needs to be have enough in it that it wasn't just this one wild weekend. It was, that it goes on for a long time. And the stages of these hauntings are all very similar, where it starts out small things that you can kind of ignore and say, was that me? Did I do that? Like, did I move the key here? Did I forget that I did that? Whatever. Oh, what was that shadow? Did someone just walk in the other room? And then it starts to escalate, and whatever, depends upon what happens. But so we try to stay to the truth of the story, I guess to say the soul of the story. But
Mhm.
sometimes we have to collapse the timeline because we only have 42 minutes to tell a story.
Right.
So it's a mixture of trying to, because some people don't have exact examples. They'll say, oh, I heard disembodied footsteps, or I heard people talking but nobody was there. And so sometimes you have to kind of put those both in the same scene in order to get everything in. But we keep an open line of communication with the folks who are the real people and kind of say, hey, what do you think about our bringing, like, say there was two seances going on in a story,
Mhm.
like Return to Bergen House. There were two seances, and we, brought it into one with characters from the two different seances at the same seance table. So, and it's fine. The people were fine with it. It wasn't like we were, changing the truth. It was just in order to be able to tell the story, we couldn't go back to the seance twice. We, did the
Right.
seance one time.
So
So,
when, so when you have like the demonologist
mhm.
and and the different psychics that I've seen in these 5 episodes, are they people that you brought in, or were they these original people that did these people go and seek out this help before they ended
Oh
up
yeah,
being show?
we don't solve cases that, like, I've done many different parts of this genre where some of them are investigative and some are like past tense stories. Like Most Terrifying Places, those were like little 7-minute vignettes all brought together to make an hour-long show. So you don't need as much. You need like one or two people to tell their story, and you do whatever. This show's a little bit different, but there's a mixture. And like Bill Bean, who is the deliverance minister that you saw in the second episode that worked with the Chicago family, he's been on several episodes of earlier seasons of A Haunting, and he's a favorite of many viewers. So he told us about this story in Chicago, and we reached out. Have had a wonderful researcher AP named Trisha Dozier, and she reached out to them, had long conversations with them, and They agreed to do it, and so that was great. And then when it came to like some of the ones you're going to be seeing soon, I think next week's what called Nevermore, and that was one of my contacts from another show that I work on called Destination Fear. And then I'm trying to think. There's like a mixture. Like some of the folks you saw in Bergen House, I had done that story for Most Terrifying Places, but we couldn't tell much of the story in 7 minutes.
Mhm.
And so being able to do an hour on one thing gives us time to really do a deep dive. So we were just, happy that they were open and willing to do it.
Are there any places that you're thinking of, like for the future? Like when we were had Lloyd Auerbach, he was telling us about. I mean, I live in California, and I haven't been to the Moss Beach
Must have,
Distillery restaurant or this giant ship. I forget where the ship is. If it's in Alameda, I
yes,
think.
Almeida. Yes, yes, yeah.
Have you thought, hearing these on these shows and hearing about them, that that's where you'd like to go and do do a filming, or
Well, strange that you bring that up. Actually,
maybe
Lloyd.
psychic?
I met Lloyd at Moss Beach. We did a story on the Blue Lady of the Moss Beach Distillery for Most Terrifying Places back in 2018, I believe it was, and that was when I was when I lived my life on the road, and flew out to California and did that piece. We shot on the beach, we shot in the restaurant. But we preferred to shoot when the restaurant's closed, and there was some miscommunication. The restaurant wasn't closed, so
Wow.
it was a kind of a crazy day trying to shoot around people and not cause any problem for them and trying to get what we needed. And I remember I had this one actor who just wouldn't take direction. He just was like, I'm going to do this. And he was this big, I'm going to do this. Like, yeah, just stand on that X, please. And, whatever. It was kind of funny.
So
So,
do you find that at like when you have crew, you have cameramen, micro, all these different people coming from different walks of life,
mhm.
have doing these shows, I would assume that maybe some of the people came in completely oblivious to these things and then are surprised at what they see and learn, or maybe even have an experience themselves, so that it could be changing the crew being on this. Or do you find you're surrounded by skeptics, or how's
A
your
little bit
work environment?
a little bit of all those things, but I find that a lot of the cameramen are cynical about it. I mean, they're open and they're very creative, and so they're like, "Oh, this will be cool" and whatever. But I've had like I remember I think it was Kim Russo started to give a reading to one of the cameramen, and he was like, "Whoa, wait a minute," because it was a little too dead on, and he was like, "Meh," like he wasn't ready for that and whatever. That was kind of funny. But yeah, actually, it was at I think it was White Hill Mansion in New Jersey. Do you know that place?
No, no, I don't.
It's like this. I think it was around during I can't remember which war, Revolutionary. I think the Hessians and stuff were there or whatever. Anyways, we were shooting there, and I saw the sound guy who was a local. He was our sound guy with the pole and everything, and he looked like he had just seen a ghost, as they say. And I'm like, are you okay? And he goes, I just saw a woman on the stairs. I just saw she was wearing a dress, but she was cut off at the waist or something, and I'm like, okay. But he was like ashen. He was like, wow, So it was pretty funny. Um,
Well, I I thought two things that occurred to me that I thought was strange about the people, that if you're buying a funeral parlor or a
right,
hospital, how can you
right.
not expect that you might be coming into the spirits of deceased people? It's a deceased people place,
I think she just saw the price tag and thought, ooh, this is
right? I mean, they're
cool.
beautiful, the buildings and I'm just saying this must have been an amazing thing to find. But I would think that somewhere, even if you were a skeptic, you would think, well, yeah, this is a funeral parlor.
Right. It was the same with Asylum 49, right? You buy an old hospital to turn into a haunted house, but what happens when your haunted house is really haunted? It's like that's the crazy.
Yeah. So are they still doing that today,
Yeah,
or?
they still do it. I think the nursing home was the back half of it was sold after. Like I think they bought the hospital side in like 2006, if I'm not mistaken, and then And the nursing home was in the back half of the building or something, and then I think that sold in years past, and that's been turned into, I think, a shopping mall or something. But they're still around. They're still doing tours, as far as I know. The folks from the costume store are, still allow folks to come and do tours. But the real life people, the folks from the second story, unfortunately, things have started back up again in their house. They never moved out of that house. They stayed in that house.
Chicago, the Chicago story.
In the Chicago story, they stayed in that house, and I guess they're experiencing some issues again. And Bill told them that he'd come back, and whatever they needed, he'd come back. He was not going to abandon them. So, trying to think of what other stories there have been so far. Oh, and then the Rhode Island couple, they're still together. Um, and he still experiences stuff. I can't wait for you guys to see like the other ones coming up. There's some really good ones coming up. I can't give away quite yet.
Well, I have to say, I wait and watch them in the day.
Probably smart. And I've seen them all. I can't count how many times I've seen them because I've, for editing and for whatever purposes. And I still enjoy every single time I go through them. I was like, okay, that was a good episode.
Well, it's because for me, what I've always liked in any films or anything is when it's from a real story.
Hmm.
And when it's from a real story, it's different than something that's fiction.
Hmm.
And it touches into places that some people may have been afraid. That's the part that I hope our listeners can get out of this, is that if they have anything experiencing like that, they should share it with their family. They
Yeah,
should share it with it, because it may turn out just like in your episodes where the husband is seeing things, but he doesn't tell the wife's experiencing it, doesn't tell the husband.
right.
They would share it earlier on. They would give comfort and support to each other, and
Hmm.
also be a stronger bond together in dealing whatever they're facing.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many times I feel like I'm writing that line in every episode. And Dana never said a thing, or Sabrina never said a thing.
I
And
wonder why. Like, to me, it's the first thing I come running out to tell everybody. So I don't know why people feel that way. What's the conditioning not to share these? Are they afraid they're going to be told they're crazy?
I
Are
think
they
that's it. I
afraid?
think that more than anything, I think they're afraid of being told, I don't think so, or you're nuts, or whatever. I don't know. Or they don't want to worry the other person. Maybe they think they have enough on their plate. I don't know. But it's hard too when there's kids, when there's kids involved. It's like always, that's always so hard. So, but yeah. And actually, I know you've spoken to a number of remote viewers on your show because I was looking through your list of really great guests. And Russell Targ. Oh my God, I study remote viewing under Lynn Buchanan.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's such a sweet,
One of
nice
the
man.
original spies.
Yes,
Psychic.
I've met him. He's a very nice man.
Very
Very nice
nice
man.
man. Yep.
Yeah, I'm also a remote viewer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, in fact, my remote viewing started with Dean Radin and Russell Targ. Because
Okay.
my husband worked in a company that they started working at the same company, and they had something called the Phenom Project. And I was a subject in scientific phenom experiments.
Very
And
cool.
that's when I discovered, I've never been trained as a remote viewer, but I could remote view because that's what they asked me to do. But I didn't know I could do that
Gotcha.
until I laid on the floor in my husband's office, and Russell said to me, I'm going to show you a picture on the computer that hasn't been selected yet.
Okay.
And we want you to draw what it is at 1 o'clock, but we'll show you what it picks at 3. So nobody knows who the picture is. It's precognitive remote viewing.
Yeah.
We're
Oh, wow.
remote viewing into the future because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So I've learned so many things, but we've been friends now. I've been friends with Dean and Russell now for over 23 years now.
Fantastic.
And I always credit them, to thank them for encouraging me to write a book that I'm working on getting self-publishing soon. And,
Cool.
I credit them for introducing me to all these wonderful, interesting people, and going to these parapsychology conferences and the International Remote Viewing Association conferences, and opened up a whole world of interesting characters and people in my life. So I can't thank them enough for being there.
Mm-hmm.
Russell does this thing where he calls me, and I was on the phone with him for an hour yesterday because he had a show he was on, and it was such a great show with him and Jeffrey Mishlove. And what he does is, he still has taught classes or done things at, conferences and stuff. So he finds an unusual object to remote view.
Mm-hmm.
Calls me up to remote view it first to see whether it's something he would use.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last one we just did, I can't even pronounce the name of it, but it's a many-sided thing that's used in geometric or,
A dodecahedron?
yeah, I think it has like 20 something sides or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And he said I would call it a 99% correct, remote viewing. Uh, so these are like spontaneous, just instant things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyways, I've been very grateful to them for that. And when I've had unusual experiences, I've been able to call Dean or Russell to, if I'm feeling really like heightened and energetic, like what just happened? Why did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been really grateful to be able to have them to consult with when I've wanted to talk to somebody about. It's not the sort of thing you can call every person up and say,
Right.
what
Right.
just happened?
Right. No, and you really appreciate those that can. I'm a twin, so my twin sister is very different. She's very practical, and she's a veterinary surgery nurse, whatever. She's had the same job that she loves, and they love her for like 25 years. Of course, as a TV producer, you're changing every time a season ends to something else, and maybe going back for another season at another time. But she always calls me, I'm the other half of her. I'm the other, like we're the other side of the coin. Like we meet in the middle, but when it comes to any of the psychic stuff, that's Laura's side of the fence. So it's
We know all the stories about twins. She's just not opening up to the
that's
fact
what
that we
that's what I
know
would say too. And
that.
I even said something. I just took a psychometry class this past weekend with Cindy Kaza from Holzer Files. I don't know if you know who she is.
No.
Wonderful young psychic, very very accurate. And she was teaching us how to do psychometry. But I think I was remote viewing more than anything else because that's what I'm trained to do. And they kept doing these little breakout rooms in Zoom. And one gal I was working with, and you can't see what they're holding, and I kept seeing this picture of a young Marine in dress blues, the kind you'd put on a mantle or a coffin, kind of a thing. And every time I'm trying to remote view, psychometrize whatever she was holding, I am like, this young Marine keeps interrupting me. Her nephew is graduating from Lejeune. So I was like, okay, well, that's a validation. And then another gal I worked, sorry?
I'm saying it's showing me that, we're just meeting for the first time on this podcast together. And I'm seeing that you're really well-rounded in many areas, not just in the ghost and haunting section,
Mhm.
but you're really open to all these other parapsychology and things that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, Lisette Coley's a dear friend of mine who runs the Parapsychology Foundation. Her grandmother was Eileen Garrett, the famous psychic from
Oh,
Ireland.
yes.
She's wonderful. And I met her through doing a piece on Mysteries at the Museum, I believe it was. And we did a piece about her grandmother solving the R101 disaster before Hindenburg. Anyway, and we just got on like a house on fire. She's fantastic. So she's a great resource in parapsychology. And I did a piece with Lynn Buchanan. That's how I met him, through, I'm trying to remember who it was, but there was like this strange connection. Um, and we did a piece on the psychic spies during on Greatest Mysteries of the White House. So I guess when Jimmy Carter was retired, somebody asked him, "What was the strangest thing that happened when you were the president?" And he said a psychic spy found a downed spy plane, and
What's
and I guess it tells the story. And then that's what hit all the newspapers and the magazines. And Bill Clinton was president at the time, and people were clamoring, why are you spending millions of dollars on psychics, blah blah blah. And so he closed down, or supposedly closed down. I don't know if that's just if they went further into dark ops or whatever, because I just think there's too much that they can find. I've seen too many validating um, results from doing sessions that there's no way that stuff is not useful.
Well, I think if anyone watches Third Eye Spies,
Hmm.
have you seen that movie?
No.
Oh, well, you have to go to YouTube and check out, it's Russell Targ's
Okay.
movie that Russell is an amazing man. He's going to be 88 in April.
I'd love them.
And he made this film in his 80s.
Uh-huh.
And he said, after Ingo Swann had passed away, who was a very famous remote viewer,
Yeah.
he said, I realized I'd better document everything right now. and
Mhm.
his son, who's a lawyer, got all of the information declassified in Washington,
Wow.
D.C., and he was able to then make this film about the work that was done at Stanford Research
Right.
for 20 years that the government funded $1 million a year for the program.
Mhm.
And I do a remote viewing in that in the extras.
Mhm.
I didn't I wasn't able to get in the original body of the film. He had me in there, he said, but the CIA is giving us so much information that we don't have, the film is now 2.5 hours. I have to cut it out.
Yeah,
So I'm
right.
gonna have to cut you out and a whole bunch of other people. So he put our remote viewing in on the extras of the film.
Oh,
So if you
cool.
check out the film, though, it will tell you and leave you feeling that I think these things are still going on, but we just don't know about
How
it.
can they not? I mean, Andrea Puharich, he was a researcher for the government. He was kind of like the J. Allen Hynek of paranormal for the government. I mean, Hynek was for Project Blue Book, and they basically hired him to make excuses for the stuff that people were saying until he had spoken to so many pilots, police officers, college professors that had seen these UFOs that he was like, there's something. It's not nothing. It's not swamp gas. It's not the planet Venus. It's not a weather balloon. But I don't know what it is, but somebody's got to study it, and it can't be the government.
Well, it seems you could have a whole nother section of television shows in the paranormal going into the UFO and
Yeah,
exploring what goes on. And that's, I haven't touched much on that. That's a whole nother avenue of
right.
investigation. I've had an unusual experience, but uh, I wanted to just go back to
Sure.
one thing I wanted to share, because if anyone does watch the Asylum 49 episode, I
Hmm.
want to share what it feels like, the amount of terror it is when you feel like someone is possessing you and you're,
Hmm.
young or you're inexperienced. Now I don't feel the same fear about these things. And the ideas of being able to say, like the woman in your show did, you have to go out of here, you have to leave. The advice that they're being given is the ways of getting rid of these things. So our listeners should know, if they come upon any of these things or disturbances, they can stand up and face the disturbance and say, please leave, this is my home. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know, but you need to go.
Hmm.
So I had that experience at a very young age, and it terrified me for many, many years and changed my whole plan of psychic work,
Hmm.
because I was a medical diagnosis. I would do something called cases for Werner Erhard during
Oh.
he was, it was his way before he formed EST. It was a group called Mind Dynamics that he was a instructor at, and then he broke from Mind Dynamics and formed EST. So this is when I knew him. We were the second class he'd ever taught in any of this
Oh, wow.
stuff. And my brothers and I were the only kids that were in this. The other people were all, white middle class adults who had the money to shell out and do this.
Hmm.
But my father, who had very little money, thought it was such an amazing program. He wanted us all to go in it because it was going to expand your mind. And at the end, you were going to be able to be told the name, the age, and the city of someone. And in
Hmm.
minutes, you would be able to say everything that was wrong with the person and then do healing on them in your little workshop in your mind.
Hmm.
So I did that, volunteer. Of course, everybody was clamoring to volunteer and be next to Werner. And, it was a very groupy, culty
Yeah.
thing besides.
Hmm.
And I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying what I learned from the experience.
And learn something from any experience.
That's right. And I learned to never get involved in those kind again. But what had happened was, and it's just like your people that had a funeral parlor, your people who had a hospital. I was looking into bodies that were very, very sick. And they
Hmm.
were bodies that some of them were going to be dying or were in
Very
the
careful.
process of dying.
Yeah, you have to be careful.
And nobody in the organization, I was 16 years old at the time,
Hmm.
they would have me on stage in front of, 200 people doing these cases, and they would just tell you the name and you would do the thing.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking that I'm doing this volunteer, I'm helping people, I'm working on healing them, I'm putting light on them, helping them with their sickness.
Right.
Well, after I'm doing hundreds of them, and the
Hmm.
most difficult ones that other people couldn't do, I started to, I came home one day and I felt, and when I'm watching your show, I felt this entity behind me on the left side, and I'm not sure why the left side always seems to be my place, but that's where I feel it, on the left side.
Mhm.
And I'm starting to get terrified. Each day it mounts more and more, just like it was showing in your show, where it's getting stronger and stronger. And I'm feeling, and I don't have any evidence. I don't have any objects moving around. I don't have things being written in the mirror, but I know that something is trying to possess me. And it's
Mhm.
a crazy thing to say to someone, and it's hard to explain. And at that time, I had my own apartment. I had left home at 15. I was living with my boyfriend who was dodging the Vietnam War and the draft.
Mhm.
We're living in this apartment, and he's watching me get more scared. And each day I'm afraid to go to the bathroom by myself.
Yeah.
That's how scared I became.
Mhm.
And the entity was over me. And I said to him, this thing is trying to take over my body. I don't know what to do. I can't even go in this room without you. I can't be left alone.
Where'd you pick it up? Where did you pick up that entity? Where did it
Oh,
come, where did
yeah.
it come
I
from?
found it when I tried to get rid of it, where it came
Oh,
from.
okay.
So what I did was I called Werner right away, because to me, this was a serious thing that was happening to me and I needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, you create your own reality. I
Mm.
mean, nothing about the fact that we're looking inside people with cancer and emphysema and
Yeah.
heart conditions. And, we're not looking into healthy bodies here, looking
Right.
into sick, diseased people.
Yeah.
So they never taught in the course anything about protecting yourself. And
Mhm.
no one knew, nobody, this is 1971.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody's big on that. I did notice that when he started EST, they stopped doing cases and instead starting to do psychological profiling, because I think I might not have been the only one who was picking up and carrying home people's sicknesses.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I was so disillusioned that these people I worked for free for a year and a half wouldn't help me when this frightening thing was happening.
Oh my God.
So my dad said, who was a spiritual man, he wasn't he was a few hours away from me. He said, you have to face whatever it is. And just like what the psychics told the people in your story, you have to tell them they have to leave. They cannot enter your body anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in what I thought was a sleep, but it really wasn't really like sleep. And I said, I need to face this.
Mm-hmm.
And in this sleep-like, dream-like, nightmarish state, I had all of my senses. I could smell, I could taste, I could touch. And I see this man in the distance, and I realize he's the man that I had been healing on, that was a very older man that was dying.
Get chills.
And
Okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
look at him in the distance, and all of a sudden I look at my arms and I see holes on my arms open up, and blood is just coming out down my arms in this dream-like state experience. And I say, you cannot have my body anymore. You have to leave. And the the part of him that was getting stronger as this situation, like my blood coming out of the arms, he was becoming, instead of faint, and he was becoming more clear. When I
Mm-hmm.
said, you have to stop, you have to go, he started to fade away. And all of the energy in my room, where the cat was running around in circles, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
all this like energy was running around there, like this, like this, like this. All of a sudden, when he faded out in the dream-like state into just disappear, everything in the room stopped, and it became totally quiet and silent. And I felt all that negativity and dark blackness was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tremendous relief. And I quit Werner and the group the next day. Said,
Yeah.
I will never do anything psychic ever again.
Well, that's
And I
unfortunate.
was a
Gift.
phenomenal reader of body work. I mean, I really was amazing. I could tell them what kind of chemicals were inside the bloodstream when I didn't know anything about doctors or what they would prescribe for a person's illness.
Yeah.
So the information that would come, I saw what emphysema really looks like. And when I was in Chicago at the Museum of Science and Industry, I saw emphysema lungs in a like cased thing. It was
Black.
exactly like what I had seen when I had done those
Wow.
viewings. So I was doing remote viewing back then, but never knew that wasn't the word for it.
Yeah.
Wasn't until I met Dean and Russell. But the fear of that stopped me from doing any kind of organized psychic things. I
Mhm.
just lived whatever dreams happened after that, and whatever psychic things that happened truly naturally on their own. And I was
Right.
plenty busy enough with that.
Right.
It was only until I met Dean and Russell in 1998 that I was willing to be a subject in psychic phenomena research, because I knew I wasn't doing it to someone who was a charlatan who was going to make money
Right.
off of me.
Right.
And we were purely doing it to
For research.
understand the research of what goes on in people like us who have these kinds of experiences.
Mhm, mhm.
So seeing your scene in this, I'm just saying, watching those shows for me is
I
like
hope we're not
living.
triggering it. I hope we're not triggering you.
Oh, no, it brings back because I'm visually seeing something that happened to me. I'm 60, I'll be 60. This happened, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's some very validating thing that even though I may have said this story many times in those 50 years,
Mhm,
something about seeing it on a television program and
mhm,
the woman just saying, we have to get rid of it this way.
mhm.
It's just validating. It's more than validating.
Oh, good.
It's a very incredible experience to see that visually.
Oh,
So
good.
I just want to say, if it wasn't for Kay announcing that these shows were coming, I would have not known. And so I'm so glad that I've been exposed to all these programs I had not known about, because there's so much out there.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, this season we started with the 105th show of A Haunting. So there's 105 before I ever came on board you could watch.
That's an amazing collection, and that listeners should know that there is these programs that they can see. Some of them are a little scary. Some of them may not be as scary,
Right.
and I'm hoping that other people, when they see this, really start to talk about what's happened to them in their life that they've never shared with their family. Maybe it was when they were a kid, maybe it was when they were older,
Yeah.
but let people know that this is not, there's nothing to be skeptical about here. These are factual things that are going on in people's lives.
Right.
And it's only now that they're able to see more that's gone on in television, where, as we were saying in years ago, what did you have? You had Topper, you had these shows, Ghostbusters,
Ghost and Mrs. Muir was one of my
right.
favorites when I was a girl. I loved that. And Nanny and the Professor, right? Phoebe Figalili is a funny name, but strange things keep happening with when Nanny's around. I always love stories about magical people and unexplainable things. So
So we're coming on our hour, but what I'd like to know is what your plans for the future are, and if there's shows that you're already working on that are going to be coming out next, or other type ones besides A Haunting, or anything you want to share with the listeners about your future in television and being a television producer.
well, sure. I mean, life is what happens when you're making other plans. So I can make all the plans I want, but
Yes.
I mean, I'd love it if we got a season 12. I think there's lots of great stories out there to tell. And I think now that, folks know they can trust us with their stories and, that we'll really try to keep to the heart and soul of the story. And a lot of times it's a cautionary tale and people want to help other people. If we get a season 12, we'll need more stories. So if someone feels like they have a story, they've seen the show, and they kind of understand what it takes, drop me a line at Laura at newdominion.com, and I'll get one of my staff to call you if we get picked up. And then, I mean, there's a lot of shows out there, but right now I just need to sleep. That was an exhausting 10 months. Today was my actual official last day of my contract for finishing. We just delivered the final episode today. So this is a very fortuitous time to be talking to you. So, I mean, I hope to stay doing paranormal television. I absolutely love it. I think there's so many great stories to tell, so many wonderful people to meet, and I'm always fascinated with the next thing, so yeah, just like you, we're just asking the big questions and hoping for answers.
And we're sharing it with other people because stories can heal.
Yes.
And that's what my podcast or YouTube is all about, is
Mhm.
stories, bringing stories to people. And you never know where they're listening, because now with the internet, these things are worldwide now. And in an instant, someone
Mm,
else can watch the two of us on a show in Egypt. And that wasn't like that before.
right.
So
Well,
it's
if you watched, you saw episode 2 about the family. They found Bill Bean through watching our show.
wonderful.
So when they were in the worst of what was happening to them, she turned on an episode, and there was Bill Bean on an earlier episode, in like early season 2 or something, and she watched the credits and wrote down his name and found him, and he was the one who helped them. So, I mean, yeah, television, as crappy as it can be in some ways, has a huge potential in healing and bringing closure. And I mean, political theater is all about that, right? Is about being able to control the destiny or the outcome, and helping people to heal perhaps some giant rift or answer a question. I mean, how many times have you had a question and all of a sudden you're watching something, like watching John Edwards, the psychic on TV. I used to think he had these messages for me all the time. They were so specific, and I was like, wait a minute, that's a show that's been recorded a long time ago, and I'm watching it today, and yet I really feel like that message was for me. So I don't know.
But
Uh,
you never know where the message comes from.
you don't.
And maybe, it doesn't, it's when you're meant to hear something, somehow it presents itself, or you open a book and it's right there in the book, and you're ready to to
Yep.
to to say, oh wow, that's just what I needed to hear at this moment.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
part about, is if we kind of take our intellect and put it to the side and just let what naturally flows into us, we find ourselves exploring and understanding other things that we didn't know was available to us, because we become open to it instead of saying, oh no, that can't happen.
Right.
We don't know what can happen. Anything can happen. It's just, life is a mystery. And I think
That it is.
it's a fun mystery. So I want our audience also to know that on our description, we'll have whatever you send us in email or whichever way you want, where they will be able to contact you if they think they have something that might be good for your show, or if they just want to know what shows you'll be coming up with in the future. So
Okay.
we'll have that on our site.
Great.
And if you have any photos about any of the things that we just discussed,
I'll dig up those photos about Drakelow tunnels. Yep,
okay.
definitely do that. And I think on Facebook there is a page for a haunting television show or something, so you can find out what the next episode is in advance.
Okay, that we have. I've already downloaded the
Okay.
front of that. So I'll look forward to that. And then this will be our next show. So that's really exciting.
Mhm.
And it's been a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah,
I
my
hope
pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. And I look forward to maybe having you again sometime in the future when it's the end of another season. So we can have a remake then.
Okay, cool. Hey, well, maybe there'll have to be an episode starring Gail Heisen.
Oh, hey, if you ever need me, I'm always available. It's one thing I like. I love being on camera. For some reason, I become very animated and natural and relaxed when the camera goes on.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you get a little vacation after all the work that you did. Tonight is the next episode that I'm going to be watching, episode number 6. And I look forward to seeing you again somewhere here or there, or maybe when I'm in New York sometime, you
Please.
and UK and I can have lunch together.
That is a date.
That would be fun. Let's look forward to it. Have a
Okay.
great day.
Thank you.
And listeners, we want to thank you for being here today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, tell your friends about us. We love to hear from you. And I also answer every question that comes on my show. I don't do it right away, but I get to it and it will all be answered. So if there's anything you want to know, let us know. And if there's any suggestions you have of guests you'd love to hear about, let us know that too. Have a great and wonderful week. And thank you for being on a Small, Medium, at Large podcast. And remember, stories heal.